Hi, today I'm going to read you a selection from my tiny little Bible. Actually, I'm not really going to read it. There's nothing to read in here. This is not one of those, you've probably seen them, the little Bibles that have the actual whole Bible printed, and they're about this big. They're really, really cool. My wife actually bought this for me yesterday, which I thought was amazingly thoughtful. She knows I collect Bibles, obviously. But anyway, she got this for me. But actually, today what I want to do is I want to kind of relate a little bit of my background, a little bit of my history to you guys, just simply because there's no reason whatsoever. It's just sort of I was thinking about it and thought, hey, that might make an interesting video. Now, if you've seen my profile or maybe watched some of my older videos, you see that I was a professor for about 3 years. I was a tenure track professor. Tenure track professor meaning I was working a job that was expected to be a career position, meaning I would have eventually gotten tenure, and eventually after that retired from that job. Ultimately, the college went bankrupt and we were all fired, and so it didn't happen, which it really sucked. I'm still reeling from the tragedy, even though it's been over 3 years. Or I guess not quite over 3 years. Anyway, it's been almost 3 years. It's still painful. It was the best job I've ever had, and I was really, really, really happy doing that. But anyway, this happened while I was teaching. I was asked to teach a class called Historical Geology. Now, the course normally, geology is not it's not an area. It's not my area of expertise. It's certainly not my training. And but because it was historical geology and the text emphasized a lot of the paleontology and the history of life at the same time as the geologic processes, which I do have background in paleontology. So I was asked if I could teach this, and I learned a lot. There's a lot about the actual geological principles that I had learned but didn't really know very well, and I had to sort of relearn these. And it's always teaching's the best way to learn anything, in my opinion. I mean, I learn more than my students in any class I've taught. So I was teaching this class, and I had in the class 2 creationists. Now, one was a creationist that was in several of my classes, other classes, including my evolution classes that I taught, and she didn't buy a word of the whole thing. She was a young Earth creationist, but she learned the material. She would always when I would ask a question on an exam, her answer would always start with, "Well, evolutionists believe that," and then she would answer the question in minute detail. She was a great student. The other one, on the other hand, was not a great student. And I didn't have any issue with her, just that she just wasn't a very good student. But she started becoming a pain in the ass in this class. And my other classes that I had her in, she was, not very was confrontational. In this class, suddenly she was confrontational. It was her last year, so maybe that was the issue. She was a problem. And anyway, so chapter 3 of this class, I would assign a chapter every week, and then we would discuss the chapter over the course of over the 3 hours of class during the week. We would discuss it. And chapter 3 was called Evolution, which was a pretty brief, basic introduction to evolution. And so this was like weeks after that, even when we'd moved past it. And again, the class really I didn't do too much about evolution in the class. It wasn't an evolution class. I did try to stick to the geologic events. Anyway, so I was called into the department head. That wasn't really the title. I don't recall exactly what title we used, but faculty chair. That's what it was. Faculty chair for science department. I was called into his office and asked if I could submit unofficial copies of my transcripts to him, as well as my curriculum vitae, my resume, essentially, which is I hadn't, since I was hired, I hadn't had to show anybody this stuff, and I thought it was odd. And he wouldn't tell me what it was about, and I asked, I was like, why, he said it was required, that he had to see these, and then he explained to me that a student had filed an official complaint challenging my credentials to be teaching at the college. That's sort of something that a student can do if you don't believe a professor, at least at our school. I don't know how it is at other colleges, but if you don't believe a professor, you think maybe they're a fraud, you can call them out. And anyway, and we had a laugh over this. It was kind of weird. He wouldn't tell me who the student was, and I honestly at that time didn't know. I had some suspicions that it was the student, but I didn't have any other evidence for that. And it was dropped. That was the end of that issue. Until about a week later or 2 weeks later, when he asked me again if there's any way I could possibly tone down the evolution stuff in my historical geology class. And then, of course, I knew exactly who he was talking about. And, I was like, well, I explained to him, it's like, we're not even covering evolution. I'm obviously I'm talking about an old Earth. I'm using, terms like 4.5 billion years ago. But, we're not talking about evolution. We've moved past that. That was just the introduction portion of the class. And he said, okay, that's good. He said just the students were saying that. He said a student was saying that I was pushing evolution way too hard. I was like, that doesn't make sense at all to me. Anyway, so again, I thought it was dropped. Ultimately, more snippets. Her advisor talked to me. A couple other people came and talked to me about this, my department head or the faculty chair, more conversations with them over this. And it ultimately ended up with me under academic review, or under review with the dean, the acting dean, the real dean was on sabbatical, as well as some administrators, where I'm sitting there defending my job. Actually arguing my job. And anyway, so I got to shorten this up here. Ultimately, what happened is I was accused, the student officially, formally accused me of mocking her religion in class. Now, when I heard mocking her religion in class, my mental image was, if you've ever seen like the Chick tract about evolution, Jack Chick, little religious tract, where the professor's like, har, 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 you stupid Christians, har, 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 har. That's what the mental image I had. When it was finally, she was poked and pushed, and it's like, now what exactly did I do? It was like, well, it ultimately came out what I actually did that she was filing about, this complaint about, was assigning Chapter 3. I didn't read Chapter 3, whatever. I asked the students to read Chapter 3. Chapter 3, in the little blurb introduction, mentioned that creationism, historically, creationism was inadequate to explain the diversity of life. Because I made her read that, and that sentence was offensive to her religion, I was essentially mocking her religion in front of the class. That's what this came out to be. Of course, once that was revealed, I was like, okay, I guess we're done here, and I was, it was let go. It was the end of it, end of the story. Which, you got to understand how, I'm defending my job, and I did nothing wrong. Anyway, it was really, it pissed me off. And then it came back again, ultimately, when I thought it was all over with, that issue was over with. At the end of the semester, now all the students here had to complete a project. They actually had to do a thesis project, almost like a miniature version of graduate school, in order to graduate. Last week of school, it turns out she didn't complete her project. She fucked it up. She didn't do it. Things fell apart. She didn't get her work done, and we had we sort of had a meeting about this. What do we do about the student who's due to graduate who didn't do this project? And I was like, well, then we don't graduate her. It's that easy. And I was told, well, we know that you have an issue with her, so we can't really ethically let you have a say in this. And it's like, I don't get a say in this. It has nothing to do with this issue I had with her. She didn't do the work required to get a Bachelor of Science degree, and we're going to give her a Bachelor of Science degree. But it basically came down to, well, we know that you don't like her. And it's like, this has nothing to do with that. But anyway, because of that issue that she had made, anyway, I guess it worked for her in the end. I mean, she got her degree. And, possibly if she hadn't done this thing and hadn't had an issue with me, I would have had a vote and she may not have gotten her degree. I don't know. But it was just one of those things, it's the first thing that pops into my head when I hear about, Christians are being persecuted. And, or Christians mind their own business and, you evolutionists are doing that. Whatever it is, that's crap that they say. And it's like, well, I honestly sat in an office before several people defending my job because I assigned a chapter in a textbook on historical geology. And ultimately, what I did wrong was I didn't teach that a 6,000-year-old Earth was equally a valid theory in science. Anyway, that's it. I'm done. Sorry.